We're going to talk about 24 different players who could make or break week 2 of fantasy football. Our favorite starts and sits at each position this week. Cameron, I'll let you kick us off first here. We're going to start with the quarterbacks. We're going to go running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Who is your quarterback start of the week?
Jayden Daniels. And I think we just got to double down on what we saw last week where he had 16 rush attempts for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. Is he going to have 16 rush attempts each week? No. Is he going to have 2 rushing touchdowns each week? No. But is he going to be flirting with 10 rush attempts each week? Yeah. Is he going to be a threat to score on the ground each week? Yes. That's the thing. That it confirmed what we thought about Jayden Daniels, that he's a rushing he's just a rushing threat. And he was the quarterback 3 last week on only 184 yards and no passing touchdowns. Okay, so the passing, it can't get much worse. And he was still the quarterback 3 last week. He plays the Giants this week, who were abysmal. They were awful. And they allowed the 7th most yards of separation per dropback in the NFL last week. The Bucs were second. So, I mean, he's going against, I guess, a little bit better of a defense, but Giants were still pretty poor. So I would look for him to take a step forward in the passing game, and the rushing's still going to be in there, where I think at this point he's probably a lineup lock moving forward every single week.
You could have just left it at mobility and Giants, and we could have moved on from there. Ty, is there anything you want to add on to the Jayden Daniels argument?
No, I think this is a very similar argument to a guy like Anthony Richardson. Like, we don't care how it looks. The skill set is just going to produce in fantasy, and that has to be in your lineup at this point.
We'll keep it short and sweet at that, because Jayden Daniels is too elite of a rushing threat to not be in your lineup at this point. With what we saw in week 1, the rushing is your floor, as Josh Norris of the Underdog Football Show says. The rushing is your floor. The passing is the upside. So if Jayden Daniels is going to run all over the Washington Commanders again in week 2, or run all over the New York Giants in week 2, excuse me. Sorry, you may as well have him in your. He's going to run on his own team. Watch how bad he's going to be. No, he will crush the Giants this week. Ty, I will kick it over to you. Who's your quarterback start of the week?
Jared Goff. We said he was a start last week against the Rams, and it wasn't exactly like what you would expect from a Jared Goff indoors at home, week 1, prime time, all that kind of stuff in a favorable matchup. But he kind of has another favorable matchup this week against Tampa, right? In 2 games last year versus Tampa Bay, he threw for 353 yards and 2 touchdowns in 1 game. In the second game, I believe was the playoff game, 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, but 43 passing attempts. Yeah, like Detroit's going to get theirs on the ground against Tampa, but they are also going to, I have to think that they're going to get Amon-Ra St. Brown a little more involved in the game plan after just 2 catches, right? So I'm still on the Jared Goff train this week. I know last week wasn't exactly what you wanted, but I also don't really think that you were starting Jared Goff. I think you also had a quarterback in place of Goff. I think this is the week where you can kind of pivot. We're going to get to 3 sets. I would probably play Goff over each one of our sets this week.
I would agree with that. And this is another home game for Jared Goff as well, who just plays substantially better at home. Again, didn't really show in week 1 entirely, but this is a game where I do like Jared Goff. And if I remember correctly, this is the highest projected point total of the week as well at 51.5. Cameron, what about you? What are your thoughts on Jared Goff this week?
Well, I just want to say thanks, Ty, for rubbing it in that he was my start of the week last week. I get it. It didn't hit. I had a rough week last week with my starts and sits. We're redeeming ourselves this week. So I just want to thank you for rubbing that in. But historically, Goff has kind of lit this Tampa Bay team up. I know it's like a different defense and everything, but he's averaging 415 pass yards against them in his career for 2.3 passing touchdowns a game. So I mean, I would say, we're in for some good things. 2 of those games, he was on the Rams. So like I had, it was a while ago, but just a little history on your side. So yeah, I'm in on Goff again this week.
If I remember correctly, you both talked about Jared Goff last week. You also talked about Matthew Stafford last week as well. He is going to be my start of the week this week, not to double up on starting quarterbacks, but the thing with Matthew Stafford is that he scored 20-plus fantasy points in 3 of 5 games against the Cardinals since being traded to the Rams back in 2021. We just saw Josh Allen put up 232 and 2 on the Cardinals last week with only 18 completions. Stafford, I mean, he looked real solid against the Lions in week 1. You didn't get the touchdowns, but 317 yards. We're going to see a ton of consolidated targets straight to Cooper Kupp. You'll get some Demarcus Robinson and Tyler Johnson, Colby Parkinson involved as well. This Cardinals secondary is just porous. They did not get much, if any, better over the offseason. So I'm going to go ahead and roll the dice here on Matthew Stafford and make him my start of the week. What do you two think about Matthew Stafford? Again, fine game against the Lions, but wasn't this monstrous week? Do you think he's in for a mini bounce back week, we'll call it?
Yeah, I mean, and I think it just kind of goes to the thing of we're always saying about, pocket passers is Stafford had a great game. 34 completions, 49 attempts, 317 yards, but he only scored 1 touchdown. If he hits a second touchdown, right, he scores 19 points. He's a top 7 quarterback. So the touchdowns are going to matter. But like you said, this Arizona's defense is just abysmal. So, I don't think he should have any problem picking them apart.
No, and the other thing is too, this offensive line for LA is just it's backups at this point, right? Like they lost Steve Avila to IR this past week. Rob Havenstein was inactive last week. Yep. Kevin Dotson's also injured. They are starting a ton of backups. Now that may not give you the most confidence about Kyren Williams, but the fact is they're just going to have to get the ball out and quick because of that. And that's going to benefit Stafford. That's going to benefit Cooper Kupp and Kyren Williams too. Stafford is still going to be a fine play this week.
And this is a Cardinals team that can just hang too. We saw them hang with the Bills last week. They're going to be able to hang with the Cardinals this week, or the Rams, this week. This is a game that, again, I don't think it's going to be a massive shootout, but does have one of the higher point totals of the week. I think we could have some fun, some fireworks in this game. Let's move on to the quarterback sits, fellas, because if you're going to start these guys, you're going to have to look to sit somebody. So, Cameron, who is your quarterback sit of the week?
It's Joe Burrow, and I think what we were worried about in the offseason, I don't think he really calmed anyone's nerves this last week. He even came out and said the wrist swells up as the game goes on. If you watch, I think, I don't know if you guys have seen the water bottle video where he's picking it up. I think that's a little bit blown out of proportion where everyone's he can't even pick up a water bottle. But he did not look good against the Patriots. That was he ruined a lot of people's pick'ems or their survivor pools. I think it was 60% of people picked the Bengals over the Pats in week 1 or something crazy like that. Which, to be fair, felt like a lock, but it was anything but. Yeah, anything but. T. Higgins might be out again in this one. He's considered day-to-day. A lot of people think he might, he's looking more at a week 3 return than a week 2 return. And he's playing a tough Chiefs defense. They were good last year, and they showed again against Lamar. They hurried him on 19 of his throws, according to PFF, out of 41. So it's about half. And they only recorded 1 sack, but that's because Lamar Jackson ran the ball 16 times. Joe Burrow is not Lamar Jackson. If they get the kind of pressure on Joe Burrow like they did against Lamar, they're going to have a lot of sacks. Joe Burrow is going to go down a lot in that backfield. And I just don't think it's going to be a very pretty one for Cincinnati in this one.
This was my biggest fear with Joe Burrow throughout the offseason was this wrist injury is just not typical. It's not a normal wrist injury that you see quarterbacks have. This is something that he's going to be dealing with the entire season, which just raises all sorts of red flags for me. Do you have similar concern with Joe Burrow, Ty?
A little bit. I wasn't too concerned with how he played. I just think Joe Burrow sitting is a very similar argument to my sit. I will let you still transition as our gracious host, Lucas, but I think Burrow sitting is more of an indictment on the offensive, the offense as a whole. There's nothing working well. There's nothing between Chase, in the drama this offseason, Higgins' injury, like Cam said, this is just an offense that I'm not excited to really play any piece of. You still have to play Jamar, but I'm not confident in any of them.
Which is unfortunate because this was a Bengals offense that we were all anticipating a bounce back for this year after their basically season from hell last year. Not off to a great start in week 1. We're not going to overreact, but this is definitely a team to keep your eye on in the coming weeks. And Joe Burrow might be one of those guys you just have to sit and see if he can bounce back this week. Tyler, I'll go ahead and transition to you now. Who is your quarterback sit of the week?
It's Trevor Lawrence. And I think a lot of people weren't starting Lawrence last week. I know Cam is definitely feeling that one a little bit, but I also don't think that this is the week to start Trevor Lawrence. They're going up against the Browns. And yes, the Browns did just get smacked by Dallas, but they did hold the passing game to just 179 yards on a touchdown. And I think it was between CeeDee, Cooks, and Jalen Tolbert, just 10 catches between the three of them. Like there was not a whole lot happening in the passing game for Dallas. So the matchup's not great. And again, like I had said with Burrow, Lawrence sitting is more of an indictment on the Jaguars offense that was just very underwhelming. And there was nothing that we could take as substance after their matchup against Miami. Granted, Miami's a great defense, but the offense, 17 points in the first half, and that just stalled in the second half. I still have question marks about this offense. I would rather not try to go into week 2 getting cute with it and putting Lawrence in my lineup. I'm definitely pivoting.
How deep would you go in a 2 quarterback league to avoid Trevor Lawrence? Because I think in a standard like 12-man redraft league, I don't think many people are looking at Trevor Lawrence. Maybe if you're like a Jordan Love manager and you're looking for somebody to play in place of him, that's about like the only situation I could see it happening in a 12-man league, maybe in, when you get to like 14, 16-man leagues. But how far down are you willing to go to play someone over Trevor Lawrence?
I mean, I think his ceiling is like mid quarterback 2 range. And I think where he's actually going to even out is probably like 18, 19, 20 this week, just because, again, the matchup. I really don't know what to make of the passing attack between Gabe Davis, who led the wide receivers in snaps, but then Brian Thomas, who came away with the most receiving yards. I just maybe just need to see another week of it. And it's just unfortunate, again, not to bring up Cleveland's defense again, but you're going up against one of the better defenses in the league.
Ty, we're going to play your favorite game. Let's play a little bit of a name game with Trevor Lawrence. I think this is a great opportunity. The guy you bring up, let's rattle off a few names of different quarterbacks who you would play ahead of Trevor Lawrence this week. And Cameron, you can chime in on this too, obviously. Brock Purdy against Minnesota. Purdy or Trevor Lawrence? I think I can speak for all of us. We would play Brock Purdy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Matthew Stafford, start of the week. Yes.
Yes.
Joe Burrow, Cameron, sit of the week. Would you play Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence?
No, I would still play Burrow.
I would still play Burrow as well. How about Baker Mayfield against the Lions? Would you play him or Trevor Lawrence?
Baker.
I would lean Baker as well. Justin Fields against Denver. Play him, or you would play Fields over Trevor Lawrence?
That's a pretty easy one for me.
Okay,
yeah, I got Fields as a top 12 quarterback this week.
Oh, I got to finish my quarterback rankings. I admittedly don't have Justin Fields projected yet. So, Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence?
That's the
I'll
line
say
for
Herbert.
me.
That's the line for you. You play Trevor Lawrence ahead of Herbert?
I think I would, but I think it's like right there. And the reason I just don't like Herbert this week is because he's playing Carolina, and I think they're just going to run the crap out of the ball. That's my worry with that game, is that they just don't throw it all because they just don't have to.
That's 100% my worry in that as well. So I probably would lean Lawrence, though Justin Herbert is fascinating. Last one I'll bring up because he's my sit of the week. Caleb Williams or Trevor Lawrence. Who would you play this week?
I play Lawrence.
I
don't want another stinker from. Yeah.
You both lean Lawrence there?
When the floor is as low as I didn't think the floor could be as low as it was last week for Caleb. So that pushes me to Lawrence.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of my deal with Caleb Williams, right? Is like, I just don't think it's wise to have him in your lineup until he shows he can figure out how to put Shane Waldron's offense together. And I don't know if that's an indictment on Caleb Williams. I don't know if that's an indictment on Shane Waldron. That is just the reality that we are holding right now. It is not a pro or anti take either direction. And I know this game could be high scoring against the Texans, if the Bears need to sling it around the yard to keep up with them. But like, this was a team that was also down 17-0 last week, and Caleb Williams still only had 92, 94 passing yards.
Yeah, 92.
I'm just not interested whatsoever. Like, Anthony Richardson is just an enigma. I'm not even going to analytically like try and form an argument around that, because the man completed 9 passes for like 214 yards. Like, that is just otherworldly. And the throws that he was making were, it could have been an even bigger day. Like, Anthony Richardson could have been a near 300-yard passer last week on freaking 10 completions, right? Like, those stats just go out the window for me in this. So yeah, for me, I got to see it with Caleb Williams. He's not one I'm willing to roll out there, even in a matchup that, could have, again, some potential fireworks in it. I'm just not interested whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I need to see it for a week. I would rather have him pop out for 30 on my bench than try and start him until he has a good week. Like, I'm not touching him until I see something decent happen in a week.
Yeah, they're going to need to throw the ball because they're going up against Houston. So I'm expecting Chicago to be playing from behind quite a bit in that game. But there was nothing from week 1 that gave me any confidence, at least for this week. Down the road, we can revisit, right. But at least for this week, don't get cute with it.
All right, fellas, this is the part of the episode where we talk to the 93%. And the 93% is the amount of people who watch our videos on YouTube but aren't subscribed yet, okay? So we're going to change that real quick. We're literally going to take a moment to pause and do that. I want you to go ahead, hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell as well. That way you'll be alerted when all of our newest episodes are up. We got 3 videos smack dab in the middle of the week for you. We've got a reaction video at the beginning of every week. We've got a trade video in the middle of the week. And we got this episode where we're going to break down a ton of different players across a ton of different matchups for you. So make sure you're subscribed and turn on those notifications over on YouTube. And same for the podcast as well. If you're not subscribed, wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening from, make sure you're subscribed. Turn on your notifications over there as well, so you know when our episode drops first thing in the morning. Like, our podcasts are coming out at like 6 a.m. You can listen to it on your way into work. So appreciate your support. Make sure you're subscribed. Let's move on to running backs now, fellas. We got 6 different running backs here we're going to talk about. Let's start with the positive. Cameron, your running back start of the week is who?
And it makes me so happy to say this after his long-awaited, what he had to wade through injuries and stuff. But it's J.K. Dobbins. I've been wanting to say this for like 3 years, and I finally can say it. And he looked the part, in their last game. Obviously, top-end speed wasn't there. That was, on those 2 longer runs, that's what you noticed. He got up to speed. He made the right cut. He had great vision. He just wasn't breaking away from anyone. And, that hopefully will come back with time, but obviously coming off an Achilles and an ACL injury, even if we don't get that back though, with this Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, Greg Roman rush attack, he's going to see a lot of volume. And then, so on top of that, he's got, seems like the running back 1 role on lock. Chargers are going to run the ball a lot. And then they play a Carolina Panthers team that just lost their only bright spot really on defense, especially stopping the run in Derek Brown. And they could potentially be historically bad against the run this season. Like, they were bad last season, and Derek Brown was awesome for them. And now they don't have him. They could be even worse. And so, yeah, I want, any running back starting against Panthers each week is probably going to be on this list for one of us 3. And so this week it just happens to be J.K. Dobbins, who is coming off a fantastic week last week.
Yeah, this is the game where all of the overreactive Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman want to just run the crap out of the football. Justin Herbert isn't going to throw it all those like overreactions like might actually come to fruition in this game. Like, if Justin Herbert throws less than 20 passes in this game, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I think the one thing I will bring up, he and J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards did split carries last week, but that being said, it was very clear who was the more efficient, the more productive running back out of these 2. So I do agree. I think the scales are tipping towards J.K. Dobbins. Ty, are you in agreement here? Is J.K. Dobbins a fine start against Carolina this week?
I think he's a solid start. I think now 2 big runs is kind of what made the week, right? Because if you just look at it, it's just 10 carries, and he scored 2. So like there are 3 good things. There's enough for me to be like, hey, J.K. Dobbins is going to be a nice little play moving forward. I think we do need to at least acknowledge that there is a possibility, at least, that, again, we're only going to see like 8 carries. He may put up 60 yards and a touchdown, but I don't think it's going to be a workhorse role or anything like that. And I think most people realize that, but I do just want to vocalize that.
Yeah, and I do want to say he did outsnap Gus Edwards 60-40.
Yes.
It was a 60-40 split. So the carries were similar, but he was playing more. So maybe we could see some J.K. Dobbins PPR upside. I don't know. I'm just saying that could be in the cards.
Slow down there.
Whoa.
Calm down over there. Golly. No, J.K. Dobbins is a fine start this week. When I go through and finalize my rankings, I'm not going to be surprised if I have J.K. Dobbins inside of my top 20 running backs this week. I just love the matchup with Carolina. I think it's totally within the cards for him this week. Ty, what about you? Who's your running back start of the week?
It's Jordan Mason. This is with the assumption that McCaffrey isn't going to play, because when I think about where the Niners are at, they don't need to rush Christian McCaffrey back. Okay. Like, yes, it's, Minnesota maybe shocked some people with how well they played against the Giants. I just think, again, the Niners are still miles ahead of where the Vikings are. I'm expecting them to play from ahead. And this might be more so like talking to myself or telling myself this, but my concern for Jordan Mason before the season even started was that, like, I didn't think he could handle a workhorse role in the San Francisco offense. Now, that kind of sounds funny because you look at the rest of the team and you're like, well, who else would who would play if Elijah Mitchell's out for the year and McCaffrey would miss time? It's just Isaac Guerrero and Jordan Mason, right? But for Jordan Mason to go out there last week, 28 carries, 147 yards, and a rushing touchdown, why wouldn't you, right? Like, this is one of those, like, if he's going to get 30 carries, granted, against a Jets defense that the weakest part of their defense is the run game, right? So they definitely took advantage of that. But if they're going to rely on Jordan Mason as much as they did, like, they're definitely going to keep doing that when he's on the field and McCaffrey isn't playing. So again, that might be more so telling myself, like, Jordan Mason is good enough to handle 28 carries. But I also just think, like, he could sneaky be another top 10 play this week.
Yeah, I think at this point, Jordan Mason needs to be in your starting lineup, because if he's going to do what he did last week, play the game of his life, at this point, you have to fire him up as a running back 2, bare minimum, in your lineup. If you're without Christian McCaffrey, like, you are rejoicing right now if you have Jordan Mason on your team, because he is truly saving you from starting off, potentially 0-2. Cameron, you agree? Jordan Mason, fire him up this week against Minnesota Vikings defense?
Yeah, I think every chance Kyle Shanahan has ever had to prove, I just want to run the ball, like, at my core, like, he has taken it. So I just don't think he's going to, they're never going to air it out. We took Brock Purdy under or lower on pass attempts last week because last season in the regular season, he only had 2 games over 32 pass attempts. This team just runs the ball. That's what they do. They're going to do it with no matter who they have, because they trust their offensive line and scheme enough that they think they can make it work.
My running back start of the week is significantly less fun than both of yours. My running back start of the week is Najee Harris, and I really didn't have fun choosing this one, like, at all. I actually vomited a bit when I made this choice. I was told this offseason, though, that the Broncos' run defense would be drastically better because they got John Franklin Myers in a trade with the Jets for, I don't want to call it chump change, but he seemed pretty expendable to the Jets based on the price that the Broncos got him for. They also added Malcolm Roach, who had one spike year in PFF run defense, despite being pretty poor against the run in his first 3 years in the league. Ken Walker just put up 100 rushing yards and what could have been 2 rushing touchdowns if one didn't get called back for a holding penalty against them last week. So he just, he settled for 1. Really bad day at the office for Ken Walker, man. Didn't get 2 touchdowns last week. Look, the Steelers passing attack is just disgusting. We know Arthur Smith wants to run the football, all right? So let's just go ahead and plug our noses and not watch this game, because God forbid I have to watch Bo Nix check down 40 times again in this game. And let's just start Najee Harris this week, and what's going to be a fine matchup for him.
Yeah, I agree. He had 20 rush attempts last week, and I think Jaylen Warren's still coming back from that hamstring injury. I don't think he's full go yet. So I think as long as that continues to happen, you're going to just see Najee dominate the carries. And if he's against a team that's going to give up yards, the yards finally follow the carries and he finds the end zone, you're in for a pretty decent week for Najee Harris. I do want to say, too, yesterday on the podcast, I thought that Ken Walker had 2 touchdowns. And the reason I thought is because I watched his second one. But then
we watched the second one. Yep.
And I didn't process that. Even though I watched it happen, it didn't actually count. So I was almost close. I was almost right yesterday.
I was almost right. How many times could we go back in a podcast episode and be like, yeah, I was almost right. Oops. Ty, what about you? Any interest in Najee Harris this week?
Yeah, I think you could also look at it too of like they're not going to move the ball through the air, because your only option is George Pickens, and Pat Surtain is going to shadow him the entire game, because that's what Pat Surtain did to DK Metcalf, right? So we're not going to sit here and be like, oh, he's actually just going to take away one side of the field. No, they sold out to stop DK Metcalf with Surtain. They're going to do the same for Pickens. So it is definitely going to be a pretty pro Najee Harris game plan, in my opinion.
Fellas, let's take a quick break. No, I lied. We're going to do running back sits before we go to the break. What am I talking about? I took a day off and I decided I forgot how to podcast. Let's do running back sits of the week. Then we'll take a quick break. Cameron, who's your running back sit of the week?
I talked about how bad I thought the Bengals team was going to be, and so I'm just going to stick with them and go with Zack Moss in this one. Chiefs held Derrick Henry to 13 attempts for 46 yards in a game where the Ravens actually threw the ball pretty well, and Lamar was great on the ground. They still held them to that. He did, run. He did run the ball, or he did run more routes last game than Chase Brown. So, I think he's at least got some PPR upside, but I wouldn't exactly consider him like a PPR back. And he only ran the ball nine times last week against the Patriots. Well, I think the Chiefs are going to put a little more of a beat down on this Bengals team than the Patriots did. I just don't expect to see him to get enough volume, and I don't expect him to find the end zone like he did last week again. So I just, if you're not catching the ball a ton, you're not getting a ton of volume, you're not finding the end zone, it's going to be really hard to be successful as a fantasy running back.
Yeah, the only fear here is that how involved does Chase Brown get in the passing game then? Because correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Chase Brown caught 3 passes last week. So there's an opportunity he gets a little more involved this week, but yet, like you pointed out, Cameron, Zack Moss still was involved in the passing game himself. Ty, you interested in either of these Bengals running backs? I mean, I think we can all agree Chase Brown is already on your bench, but Zack Moss after a strong week 1, are you benching him this week?
I would bench both for sure. I would even go as far to say like I wouldn't even be rostering Chase Brown at this point, just because I don't think I just don't think he's going to be able to produce with the time that he's going to get, because I think Zack Moss is going to be clearly the one in this offense. And
let's go. That's the endorsement I need.
I that's not to say that I think Zack Moss needs to be in your lineup because he's the starter in Cincinnati. I think you still roster Moss. He's just going to be on your bench, and Chase Brown, you can cut your losses.
Yeah. That's what I need to hear as the one pro Zack Moss guy on this show, who was probably more anti Chase Brown than pro Zack Moss, but admittedly, no. But I do agree. I think this Kansas City Chiefs front is just too good, and there's a real chance they just absolutely dominate this Bengals offensive line. So, yeah, Cameron, I'm with you. I don't have much interest in Zack Moss this week. Tyler, what about you? Who's your running back set?
It's DeAndre Swift. So another Bears player. So we are just picking on Cincinnati and Chicago so far, but Swift finished last week with 6.2 expected fantasy points. That's not great. Even though he led the backfield in carries, still 6.2 expected fantasy points. And now he gets Houston, who just allowed only 48 yards to Jonathan Taylor on 16 carries. So they held Jonathan Taylor to 3 yards a carry. Just not a good matchup. I'm going to keep that one short and sweet. There is really no like positive that there's no positive case to make for Swift being in your lineup this week.
I mean, this is again, I started harping this towards the end of the offseason of if DeAndre Swift isn't going to be productive, if he isn't going to get a crap ton of volume, and if he isn't going to score touchdowns, I hate him at his value. I really didn't like him, and I'm worried we're going to start to see that come to fruition if Chicago doesn't find a way to make this offense more efficient, and this might not be the matchup for it. Cameron, you're avoiding DeAndre Swift too?
Yeah, there's just doesn't feel like there's much of an upside in a game where it doesn't feel like they're going to run the ball a lot. Because if I'd just be shocked if this game's close. I'm going to be honest. That's kind of where I'm at with the Chicago-Houston game. So I just don't see them running the ball, and I don't see them getting a lot of usage.
I'll go ahead and we'll transition off of that. My running back sit of the week is Zamir White. If the Ravens held Isaiah Pacheco to 3 yards per carry behind a actually impressive Chiefs offensive line in week 1, I don't even want to think about Zamir White behind the Raiders offensive line in this game. Even though I was told Brock Bowers will still help out their offensive line and make them better. But again, I won't week 1 victory lap or anything. The big thing, though, is that White averaged only 3.4 yards per attempt against the Chargers last week, and it looks like he's going to be taking a backseat to Alexander Mattison in the passing game as well. So this is just one where, I don't have much optimism for Zamir White here. He's probably going to be ranked outside of my top 25 running backs this week. My guess is he's probably going to be maybe even outside of my top 30. Just don't have any optimism after week 1 with Zamir White.
Yeah, I don't blame you. He just limited PPR upside. He only averaged 1.5 yards before contact last week. So, this offensive line wasn't doing him any favors, which was 46th in the NFL for context out of all running backs. So, and now you play a better team in the Chiefs where you're going to be down early. It feels, or no, they don't, in the Ravens. Sorry, not the Chiefs. But it does feel, if I was going to say, it feels similar to Zack Moss and what situation he's in this week, except I think he has lower PPR upside than Zack Moss will.
I just don't really know what the Raiders did last week to give you any kind of confidence with any other players besides Brock Bowers. So don't try to outsmart people. Yeah, Zamir's on your bench.
We'll take a quick break now, fellas. We'll come back with some pass catching start and sits once we're back. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We have talked through our quarterback and running back starts and sits for week 2 of fantasy football. We're going to dive into the wide receivers now, fellas. Again, we're going to start with the positive. Cameron, who is your wide receiver start of the week?
It's Malik Nabers, and this honestly could be his coming out party in the NFL. I know he has Daniel Jones, but this dude is special. He was involved in that Vikings game, and he made some good catches. He was open a lot, but he's already shown kind of his frustration in the media with Daniel Jones, which is also a good thing for fantasy because usually when a wide receiver, especially like the star wide receiver of the team, I understand he's a rookie, so he hasn't quite earned star status. But when your wide receiver 1 is frustrated with your quarterback, usually that next game they get fed targets. They're also playing the Commanders team that was terrible last year against the pass and was not great again in week 1 against the pass. Baker was 4th in passing yards against them last week. Evans was top 20 in receiving yards. Godwin was 13th in receiving yards. They did, the Giants did use Wandale in the last game, but I think that's because the Vikings just kind of got to the quarterback, and I don't think the Commanders team is going to do that. So I would look for Nabers to have a real big game this week. Obviously, I don't think he's going to have like CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill type upside just because his quarterback is Daniel Jones. But I think you're going to be very happy with him in your starting lineup.
Yeah, squeaky wheel should get the grease here in what is shaping up to be a phenomenal matchup against this Commander secondary. Anything you want to add on top, Ty?
No, I don't want to give a pass to the Giants, but the Commanders are not going to be the exotic defense that is the Minnesota Vikings defense. So I'm expecting a lot more targets to go Nabers' way this week.
I'll come right back to you, Ty. Who's your wide receiver start of the week?
It's Tank Dell. We talked about Tank Dell on our trade targets episode yesterday. Tank was tied with Nico for the most targets on the Texans. He ran 33 of 36 routes, one more than Nico, one less than Diggs. Maybe this is just me calling a shot here, or just going off on a limb. I think Tank is going to be the highest scoring Texans wide receiver this week. I will fully admit I didn't have the time to go into any kind of stats or anything to give you an argument for it. I made the case though when we talked about Tank though that this Houston wide receiver room feels like it's going to be a revolving door as to who's going to be like the highest scorer in a certain week. Like Diggs got 2 touchdowns, Nico was used downfield. I think Tank and Stroud could connect a couple more times this week against Chicago. I'm a big fan of Tank. I have maybe too high a confidence in Tank this week, but I think he's a really good start this week.
I don't hate that take that you think he's going to be the highest scoring Texans wide receiver this week, because it's going to be a carousel throughout the season. All he has to do is probably hit pay dirt, and he's going to end up being the highest scoring wide receiver. I know it took 2 touchdowns for Stephon Diggs, but I think it's totally feasible. If one of those falls to Tank Dell and he catches, another 30, 40-yard bomb down the field, totally possible that that he ends up the leading Texans wide receiver this week. Cameron, do you prefer Tank to Stephon Diggs this week, to Nico Collins, or is he still kind of third in the pecking order for you?
I think I prefer him to Diggs this week. Yeah, Diggs, like that 9 air yards just scares me in the way that this offense runs. I think he could have a lot of games where he's got almost Zay Flowers-ish numbers of like 7 catches for 43 yards or something like that. Where it's just like he's getting a lot of catches, just not a ton of yards. But I think, as long as Tank, and CJ Stroud kind of stay on that same page that we saw last season, I think he's going to be in for quite a few big weeks. So, Ty, you didn't like my Zay Flowers comment. I could see it on your face.
No, I just wanted to chime in one last time before we moved on to Lucas's start. But Houston had 40 minutes of possession against Indianapolis. Yes. They ran 76 total plays. That's not going to happen again.
No.
And I think because of that, they're going to rely a little more on the bigger plays. That benefits Tank. That benefits Nico.
If they do, it's because Joe Mixon is going to run the ball another 30 times and put up another 120 yards this week. I mean, that's going to be the reality if that's what happens again. So, banking on that likely not happening again. But I'm fine throwing Tank in at your flex this week if you got him as a wide receiver 3 on your team. I think he's definitely flexible in this matchup. I'm going to go ahead and start Chris Godwin this week. Look, he took 59% of his snaps from the slot in week 1, which is where he belongs. I don't know what Dave Canales thought was a good idea, taking him out of the slot. I mean, it worked. Don't get me wrong. It worked for Tampa Bay last year, but he went 8 for 83 in a score last week. So, I mean, he gave you 22 fantasy points, if I can do math in my head here, in week 1. Granted, that was a cakewalk with a horrendous Washington Commanders secondary, but I really do like him against Detroit this week. I don't think Godwin puts up Cooper Kupp numbers this week, right? He's not going to drop 21 targets for crying out loud, but this Lions front is no joke. And if they're going to put pressure on Baker Mayfield, and he's going to be forced to get the ball out quickly, and Godwin's going to be the primary beneficiary of that. So I really do like Chris Godwin this week. Again, this has a super high over-under. I want pieces in high-scoring games, and I think Chris Godwin is going to be the one I maybe don't want the most from Tampa Bay. I still have some touchdown intrigue in Mike Evans, but if Godwin's going to put up 765 and 1 on a given week, I will take that every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Yeah, you got to love the floor that comes with Godwin. If he's seeing this type of, if he's going to see 8 to 12 targets, which I think all 3 of us believe he will, he's seen high amounts of targets every single week. So if he's giving you a 12, 13 point floor each week, that's something that you can really hang your hat on and feel confident putting him in your starting lineup.
Yeah, his primary matchup, if he's going to be in the slot, is Amik Robertson. Talk about a feast.
Who?
Who?
I need the broadcast boys sound effect in our
We
arsenal.
need
We
it.
got to get that in next week. We need this is what we need. We need a who's that cornerback of the week, so we can just pick on a no-name cornerback. I shouldn't say a no-name quarterback. A quarterback, a lesser known cornerback in the NFL that a wide receiver can take advantage of, and we can just drop the broadcast boys on him. Chris Godwin, fire him up.
It's like a who's that Pokemon kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Who's that cornerback?
Brutal.
Amik Robertson. Oh, I never would have gotten that one.
Now, I will say though, real quick,
go ahead.
one last thing. Brian Branch did play a chunk of the game against the Rams, kind of in the flats, where, I mean, he could be more in coverage than Amik Robertson, but I'm going to trust Liam Cohen to kind of not necessarily get more out of it or to make it kind of matchup proof, but I think people are kind of underrating this Tampa offense. Yes, it was Washington matchup last week, but they're going to put up points.
We'll move on to wide receiver sits here. Cameron, I'll let you start. Who's your wide receiver sit of the week?
It's DeAndre Hopkins, and I'll admit I'm kind of taking the easy way out on this one after I picked Jayden Reed last week. I'm still licking my wounds. I'm just a little too scared to really dive in, so I'll keep this short and sweet.
There it is.
I deserve it, but I can't have the wide receiver one on my hands again after this week. And if DeAndre Hopkins is the wide receiver one against the Jets,
we'll kick you off the episode. Like, you don't have to come back. We'll excuse you. It's okay.
I might
it's a fella's
sit out
excused absence
all next week. But last week he only played 27% of snaps, which means he's not healthy. So, on a great week, you probably shouldn't be playing him anyways. And then on top of that, he plays the Jets, who held Ayuk and Debo to a combined 72 receiving yards. And then his quarterback only threw for 127 passing yards in week 1. So there's just not a lot of upside for a guy who might play limited snaps again in week 2.
Yeah, can I just go ahead and throw my wide receiver sit of the week in here too? Because I think we're going to talk in circles around these two. My wide receiver sit of the week is Calvin Ridley. What was fascinating about Calvin Ridley is that he played 83% of his snaps out wide in week 1. And we know that's where Sauce Gardner lives in this New York Jets defense. And out of D-Hop's 9 snaps last week, he actually split them 50-50. He was in the slot for 5 of them, and he was 4 out on the perimeter. So I found that fascinating. And like 9 is way too small of a sample size to make any sort of conclusion out of. But if Calvin Ridley is going to be predominantly playing on the outside, if they don't move him inside of the slot at all, like, this just isn't a matchup that I'm too intrigued by, especially when Will Levis is trying to throw in rhythm and can't find rhythm whatsoever. I don't know if that dude can keep a beat, if I'm perfectly honest. Ty, I'll let you chime in since Cameron and I both don't like these Tennessee wide receivers this week. It seems like the easy way out, but this is just a Jets defense we don't want to mess with.
I would agree. I think the easy way out is DeAndre Hopkins picking on a guy who's playing at 80% health, but that's just me.
I'll take it.
No, like, if Will Levis can throw away a game like he did against Chicago,
literally,
the Jets are literally going to make his life a living hell. So, like, I have no confidence in any Tennessee player after last week.
Let's move ahead. Let's do tight ends. We'll wrap it up here, fellas. Before we do, though, I gotta let the people know that we're running out of time for you to get involved in our giveaway. Okay, we are still running our giveaway for hitting 300,000 followers on TikTok, 500,000 total across all of our platforms. Biggest giveaway we've run yet. We've already given out a copy of College Football 25, a copy of Madden 25, and we just recently gave out a $100 Visa gift card yesterday. So what we're going to do is we are saving the final 2 prizes, the best 2 prizes, for last. A jersey of your choosing and a signed Jalen Waddle jersey. All you got to do is join our Discord. It's down in the description of the video you're watching here. just join our Discord. That's it. Leave a comment in any of our channels and you're automatically entered. We want to get back to you all and show our gratitude. So just join our Discord. That's all you got to do. We'll wrap it up here now, fellas. Tight end starts and sits of the week. We, as much as I would love to sit here and dissect the tight end position with you all, we got better things to do than overanalyze tight ends here. So Cameron, I'll let you start here. Who's your tight end start of the week?
I'm not going to do my tight end start of the week if that's okay. I'm going to let Ty do his wide receiver sit of the week. And George Pickens, if that's okay with you, Lucas.
Oh my gosh.
If that's okay with you, I'm going to allow Ty to speak on this one. And do his wide receiver.
I deserve that one. I let him chime in and I was ready to keep it moving. I'm like, wow, we're making good time here. Yeah, Ty, you can go ahead and you can go ahead and talk about George Pickens as your sit of the week.
You know the best part about this? I'm just going to keep it to 30 seconds so he can just sit in the misery and then he has to go right back into hosting. George Pickens goes up against Pat Surtain with Justin Fields as a quarterback. 13, 14, 15, 16. I don't have any confidence in the Steelers passing game. 20, 21, 22. Okay, we can move on.
They didn't throw the ball over the middle of the field. That's the
yes.
big thing. Like, oh,
as
brutal.
Ian Hartitz and Josh Norris pointed out, the middle of the field is lava. They did not throw it across the middle of the field. Yeah, no, George Pickens is definitely a sit at the wide receiver position this week, despite his strong week one. I'm gonna. What are you laughing at now?
I just saw the private chat, and then I just saw the Word doc that we have.
I was trying to give him. I gave him every
come
hint
on
I
now.
could. I gave him every hint I could. I typed Pickens in big bold letters on our doc so that Lucas wouldn't see it, and he just missed it.
I was locked into giving a great promo. I'm just trying to cut a promo here, man. That's all I'm trying to do. Trying to get the people a free jersey, a free signed Jalen Waddle jersey, if I can help it. All right, now let's move on to tight end starts and sits of the week. Cameron, who's your tight end start?
It's Brock Bowers, and I think at this point he's gonna kind of be locked in to your start of the week moving forward. I understand, if you drafted him, you probably drafted yours tight end one. So this is me telling you, don't get cute. He saw 70% of snaps and 8 or 9 targets and about 10 yards per catch last week. Minshew is not going to be getting any better. I don't think it was rough last week. And so he's just going to continue to look for a safety blanket probably every single snap, which doesn't bode extremely well for Devontae Adams as long as Minshew's out there, but it is good for Brock Bowers. And then especially when you add on top of it, Njoku and Ferguson are already missing time, the tight end pool is getting very shallow, very, very quick.
Yeah, all that needs to happen is one more of these top 10, 12 tight ends needs to miss time, and all of a sudden we're all like, crap, maybe tight end wasn't as deep as we thought it was this year. Yeah, I'm good with Brock Bowers as a start this week if he's going to get peppered with volume. Ty, you agree with that? Doesn't seem like a ton of upside, but if the volume is there, you may as well pick it up at tight end.
Correct. I had said when we were talking about Zamir White, like the only piece on the Raiders that I have any confidence in because I know exactly what I'm going to get out of them is Brock Bowers. And that's such a weird sentence because that team also has Devontae Adams, but that was like the one thing going for them was Brock Bowers.
I'll kick it right back again to you, Ty. I'm going to talk about one of our favorite players. I say our correct collectively, you and I. Cameron mixed in a little bit, but this was you and I all off season long, Ty. You can talk about our favorite tight end sleeper of the year.
It's Colby Parkinson. It's the Brock Bowers of the Rams offense. That's what I'm talking about. No, I think this is just the simplest way to put it is with Puka Nacua out of the offense. Like, yes, Cooper Kupp is going to get his, and then probably a little bit of Puka's work, or at least targets. But then we're looking at like Demarcus Robinson, Colby Parkinson, and Tyler Johnson as like the next guys up behind Cooper Kupp and Kyron Williams, because I have to think that Kyron Williams is going to be involved in the passing game. But Colby Parkinson ran the most routes of all tight ends in week 1. He's on the field a ton. That just sets him up to see some opportunities in this game against Arizona, like we've talked about already, that we're expecting to be a pretty high scoring game.
Yeah, if they're paying the man $21 million, he better be out on the field a crap ton, running a lot of routes. Cameron, how do you feel about Colby Parkinson this week?
I think you just kind of want as many parts of the Rams offense moving forward. With the way Stafford looked, he looked back to form. So yeah, I take any part of the Rams offense I can get.
Yeah, Tyler Higbee, when he's been healthy, he's kind of flirted with that, top 10, top 12 area as well. So especially with no Puka Nacua, I think there's a great opportunity here for Colby Parkinson to weasel his way into the top 10, top 12 tight ends in this offense. I'm going to go ahead and say you got to start Isaiah Likely this week. And honestly, if you picked him up off of waivers, if you dumped a bulk of your fab on him, you're almost forced into playing him this week, right? You kind of got to put your money where your mouth is. We saw Ladd McConkey last week. He caught 5 passes and score from the slot last week against the Raiders. And if Likely is splitting almost 50-50 between the slot and inline, I wouldn't be surprised if he puts up a similar like 440 and a score again in this matchup. He's going to coexist alongside Mark Andrews. Rashad Bateman ain't it. Cameron, you came to that realization last week and you admitted it, and we're proud of you. I can say I was off that train a lot sooner, but that's not important right now. What's important is that I want your thoughts on Isaiah Likely as a start this week.
Because I said that, the dude's about to pop off for like 6 catches, 150 yards, and 2 tutties this week. Is exactly what's going to happen. And then I'm going to feel really down because then I was off the week too early. But yeah, it's Isaiah Likely is their slot guy. I guess Zay Flowers kind of is too, but he's the wide receiver 2. He's essentially the wide receiver 2 in this offense. And that's how he's going to, be moving forward. And at the tight end position, like you said, 4 receptions for 40 yards. Honestly, right now is probably a top 10 week. And that feels like kind of like, it feels like his floor. So yeah, I would be very confident starting Isaiah Likely this week.
What about you, Ty? You putting him in your lineup if you got him?
Yeah, I will say I wouldn't. There's no way you can expect another 30-point performance. I don't think this is going to be the week where Isaiah Likely outscores Mark Andrews again. I think it's going to be a very pro Derrick Henry game. But I think with just how the rest of the tight ends have performed so far this year, like if Likely is going to give you 8 or 9, that's probably going to outscore all but like 8 tight ends, right? So I think Likely you have to put in your lineup.
Any chance I can get a wide receiver-esque role from the tight end position into my lineup, I typically am in favor of that. We saw that with Chikakonko a few years back. I mean, we saw that. I mean, that's what we really want is, Travis Kelce is basically playing as a wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs, even though he's, in line and in the slot. And this is what we want to see. We want to see tight ends, function as a wide receiver in these offenses. So yeah, I've got plenty of optimism for Isaiah Likely in this matchup. We'll wrap it up quick here, fellas, because honestly, if you got any of these dudes in your starting lineup, these are pretty easy sits here at the tight end position. Cameron, I'll let you go first. Who's the tight end you're sitting?
Yeah, Pat Freiermuth is not going to be mistaken for a wide receiver anytime soon. He is for sure a tight end. But Denver played well against the pass last week, and I think a big part of the reason they played well against pass because they played so bad against the run that the Seahawks were like, okay, we'll just keep giving it to Ken Walker, who's running all over you guys. And, we talked about with Najee Harris earlier. If Arthur Smith can run all over him, they're going to continue to do it. Fields is not an amazing quarterback who doesn't throw the ball over the center of the field. Freiermuth saw 4 targets last week, caught all 4 of them for 26 yards. We could see a very similar, stat line to that again this week, which is not fun in your starting lineup.
100% with you. I was worried about this with Pat Freiermuth. I know a lot of people were talking about him as a potential sleeper. I started to come around on the idea, but week 1 has kind of very quickly put that to rest for me. Again, really not trying to overreact after 1 week. Ty, you have any interest in Pat Freiermuth at all?
Nope.
Great.
No one. Nope.
Sounds great. We'll move on. Tyler, your sit of the week. Honestly, if you still got this dude on your roster, you're doing something wrong.
Exactly.
That's so. I don't know if he's a sit of the week. He is like, get him off your roster ASAP. of the week.
Yeah, he's the drop of the week. Okay, the Cole Kmet got outsnapped and had more routes run on him by Gerald Everett. There's no reason to roster Cole Kmet at this point. Now that makes 3 Bears in this episode with Caleb and Swift and Kmet. But seriously, we have expressed our concerns about Shane Waldron offenses.
Yep.
Yes, we know that how great of a situation was for Caleb with Rome and Keenan and DJ Moore. The tight ends are kind of like an afterthought in this offense. Cut your losses with all Bears tight ends.
I'm not even going to ask for any more thoughts on that. I made my drops of the week for Fantasy Pros, and Cole Kmet was probably the easiest name to put on that list after week 1. I'm going to say you can go ahead and sit Dallas Goedert this week, and I just don't think this game is going to be remotely close. I think the Eagles mop the floor with the Falcons. If it's anything, if the Falcons are the exact same Falcons that I saw in week 1, this Eagles defensive front is just as ferocious as Pittsburgh's. They don't have a TJ Watt, but they do have a Jalen Carter, and this defense will get after Kirk Cousins and force him to move out of the pocket. So if Kirk doesn't want to be mobile in the pocket, and if he can't plant and throw and drive the ball downfield off of his right Achilles in this game, I mean, it's going to get ugly so quick. So this team is going to lean on Saquon, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. They'll probably draw the bulk of the targets, but I just don't see a practical need for Dallas Goedert in this game since, again, I just think this game is going to be incredibly one-sided. I don't see a path where the Falcons make this game interesting if Kirk Cousins is going to look as awful as he did last week. And not from a box score perspective. You box score hunters out there, go watch some film. Don't touch grass today. Watch some Kirk Cousins film instead, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
For sure. Yeah, it's, he had 4 catches in the last game. One of them went for 21 yards. That means the other 3 catches he had 3 catches for 10 yards. That's just kind of gross. It's just dink and dumps. You're not really expecting the big play from Dallas Goedert.
No,
we'll wrap it up. Go ahead, Ty.
Sorry, he was the tight end 12 with 7 fantasy points. You may look at that and be like, oh, he's a top 12 guy. I don't care. The tight end 18 finished with 5.5.
I was going to say, the difference between the tight end 10 and the tight end 20 isn't going to be significant enough for you to win your matchup. And if you lose by 1.5 points because you started you sat Dallas Goedert instead of whoever the tight end 20 was, I don't know. You can come up with an analogy if you really want
Austin Hooper.
There we go. Sure, Austin Hooper, whatever, man. If you sit Dallas Goedert for Austin Hooper and you whatever, I just don't. The difference in all these tight ends is pretty insignificant at this point. I would gladly play an Isaiah Likely. I would rather play.
I'd pretty much play Taysom Hill.
Yeah, I honestly, I really don't hate that. I would play Taysom Hill. Yeah, I think I would play Taysom Hill over Dallas Goedert this week. That's not a bad take there. We'll wrap it out there, fellas. It's 24 different players who will make or break week 2 of fantasy football. Again, if you're not subscribed to the channel already, make sure you do that and turn on that notification bell as well. Look, the 7% of you all who have already, thank you. We appreciate you all. You are much valued members of our community. Now, the 93% of you can be. You just got to hit that button for me. All right. We appreciate your support as always. You can follow us on the socials. FFL is on Twitter. The FFL is on Instagram. Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. I am at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter. Cam Law FFF for Cameron. Tyler_Plath for Tyler. Those are on the screen if you are watching over on the tube. We will be back with our regularly scheduled content next week. We'll be back with the panic meter. We'll be back with some trade targets. We'll be back with more players who will make or break. See y'all next week. Deuces.
Deuces.